All right, we have just opened up our webinar. We'll just give this a few moments for all of our folks to jump on our webinar here. If you'll stand by, we'll get started here in just a few minutes or just a few moments. So you may see some things going on here in the background as I start the Facebook feed. For those that are early joiners here. For our extra audience, we actually have quite a bit of audience that joins us over on Facebook. All right, Madeleine, are you still with me there?
I'm here, Lee.
All right. We're about to get this going. Looks like we have a few folks that have joined us. It is 3:01 and we'll get started. My name is Lee Miller, Executive Director of the Advanced Television Broadcasting Alliance. And as you see on your screen, a couple of things that are floating by in regards to sponsors of the ATBA and our webinar series. And we especially thank those folks for being a sponsor and members of the ATBA. And you also can join us at broadcastingalliance.org and become a member or a sponsor for our NAB event, which will be on April the 25th, Monday evening in Vegas. So we're looking forward to actually having a live get together at NAB. So let's jump right in. I will stop the share of that and welcome to our webinar today. Someone I've been very excited to get on our Wednesday webinar, and that is Madeleine Noland from the ATSC. She's president of ATSC, and we're extremely excited to what is happening to our industry. Welcome to our webinar today.
Well, thanks so much, Lee. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So we'll jump right in, and usually I have our guests during their introductions kind of give us an idea of your past in the broadcast space and how you ended up at the ATSC. And I know you were very involved in that before you got tagged with the presidential role. So kind of give us who is Madeleine and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, thanks so much. Well, I've been involved with ATSC since roughly 2011, when I was working for a startup company who saw the digital transition as an opportunity to have interactive television. And the thought was, if we're going to be on the cutting edge of digital television, we had better join ATSC and see what's going on. So we did. And I represented their slate in the ATSC proceedings for a while. And geez, you know, you can't keep your mouth shut in a meeting, and before you know it, they want you to chair something. So then I started chairing something, and then, you know, one thing leads to another, and I was representing Telview for a little while, and then I got tapped by LG Electronics to represent them in the ATSC proceedings, which I did for 6 years, and then became president in 2019. But one of the great things about that trajectory is that I've pretty much been on the ATSC 3.0 development path from the ground up. When it was part of a planning team, it was just coming out of the planning team where the group had said, you know, we probably should do this after having studied what new codecs are available, what new physical layer capabilities are available, and would it really be worth doing another next gen, doing a new next gen standard. So the planning team came out with the answer of yes. And ATSC was busily just getting started working on the requirements based on that. And that's when I came in. And since then, I've been chairing various groups, from the ad hoc group to the specialist group to the technology group that oversees all of the development. And then now as president, you can tell I can't get enough. I just love ATSC. I love the members. I love this project. It's a very exciting time. And I couldn't feel luckier than I am to be in this role.
Well, it's been about, I don't know, 12 years or so when about the time that we formed the Advanced Television Broadcasting Alliance as the coalition, back when the LPTV industry saw that the spectrum auction was coming up and we were in trouble. And Mark Aiken shared with us the broadband overlay plan, which is ATSC 3.0, and what it can do as IP. And to me, I couldn't get my hands around it in the beginning. It's incredible to see what it has done and where it has come today. That now that what is it, 46 cities have ATSC 3.0 already today.
That's right. So a little bit about ATSC 3.0 and why is it so exciting? When we were developing the ATSC 3.0 standard, there was an early decision that this was not going to be a backward compatible standard. So if you're going to have a non-backward compatible standard and it's going to be a voluntary deployment, it had better be good. Otherwise,
Right.
Why do it? Nobody's going to do it. So we started out right off the bat saying, well, if we don't have more than a 30% boost in the physical layer capacity alone, we don't want it. And so that was a requirement from day one that the standard has to be so much better than ATSC 1.0 that it will be worth doing on a voluntary basis. And I have to say that hats off to the ATSC membership because they did it. They did indeed create a physical layer, which is so much more powerful than the ATSC 1.0 physical layer. It's currently the most efficient physical layer in the world for one-to-many broadcasts, and that is across the entire planet. No one comes closer to the Shannon limit than this system. This is absolutely the state of the art. I think the other exciting thing about the ATSC 3.0 physical layer compared to 1.0 is that with 1.0, you have a single operating point. You're going to be at 15 dB signal to noise ratio, and you're going to get 19 point something megabits per second, full stop. With ATSC 3.0, you can actually choose where you want to operate on the sort of trade-off continuum between how much data you want to push and how strong you want your signal to be. So you could have a very, very powerful signal which sends less data, or you could have a weaker signal that sends more data. And you can imagine a couple of use cases where perhaps you have a signal that you want to reach mobile devices. You want that to be highly robust, but since it's just a small screen, we don't need 4K resolution, so we can send less data, and that's okay. On the other hand, if you're trying to reach a fixed television set that might have a sophisticated stationary antenna, it's okay for the signal to be a little bit weaker, but I want to send my 4K spatial resolution, so I'm going to need a lot of data. So the cool thing is the broadcasters can operate anywhere along that continuum that they want to, and they furthermore can operate on more than one point on the continuum at the same time. So you can have your mobile service and your fixed service on these two different configurations at the same time in the same bandwidth. Very flexible, very powerful. Single frequency networks are also adding to the capability of the system. And when you add in MIMO, which is something that you could see potentially in pro receivers and pro transmitters in the future, you can get even more. So it's really great. The other thing that ATSC 3.0 is it's the first IP-based transport system for a digital terrestrial television system in the world. Again, number one, and we're using DASH and MMT as protocols. But what's really cool about the IP-based stuff is that now it opens up these business cases like data casting, which is something that I think is really a strong use case in the LPTV community. Suddenly you can send IP data packets of anything. It doesn't have to be video, audio, and captions. It can be software and firmware updates. It can be map updates. It can be smart agriculture data. It can be digital signage downloads, whatever. So that's very exciting that it's IP based. And then of course you have better TV. You have better pictures, better sound, more accessibility options, better captions, better emergency messaging capabilities, and the list goes on. But the data casting piece is one of the most interesting ones because it's really that's an opportunity for the broadcast industry to think about new business models and new verticals. And the IP base also makes it an OTA, OTT blended system. So you could envision sending some of your content over the air and some of it over the top and having the receiver be able to combine all those within the same, for a single service presented to the viewer. So anyway, ATSC 3.0, how cool is it? It's really cool, for sure.
Well, and we've noticed just in recent days, you've actually been looking or taking this around the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, so here in the US, again, very exciting. There are currently 46 cities with full power stations on, and additional cities that have low power stations on. So we're probably on the order of 55 cities or more. There's well over 184 services out there, and there are over 70 models of television sets available in the US. I think the other thing that's interesting is that at the beginning of 2021, the Consumer Technology Association put out its estimate for how many television sets would be sold in the US by their estimate that have next-gen TV capability. And their estimate was about 800,000, which is a good number because 2020,
Right.
pandemic year, we did 300,000. So that's more than a 2x increase. Terrific. But then they updated their estimate in July of 2021. And they said, yeah, we were a little low. Actually, we think it's going to be more like 3 times as much as we thought before. It's going to be more like 2.1 million, not 800,000. So we can see the trajectory of the sales of the television sets going forward, which is really exciting. And there are certainly some broadcasters out there who think those numbers are also low and expect to, quote unquote, blow them away. We'll see. When CTA puts out its numbers in January, it'll be pretty exciting to see that. And there's also an appliance market that's growing where we have set-top boxes that are coming out as white label products, set-top boxes that are being used in distance education now. There are dongles out there. So the device market is also making headway here in the US. But Lee, you asked about the going abroad. And that's also something that's happening pretty exciting. We have our neighbors. We have Canada and Mexico. In Canada, we have a new ATSC 3.0 5G convergence lab being set up at Humber College in Toronto. And this is a college of 52,000 students. This is a big, big campus. And they're already looking at a single frequency network installation. They've gotten substantial grants to build this lab out and substantial industry partners within Canada. So that's really exciting to see that happening. I was just speaking at the Western Association of Broadcast Engineers in Western Canada last week, virtual. And so we're really excited by the attention that's being given to ATSC 3.0 in Canada now. In Mexico, they're specifically looking at the distance education piece, which they think is going to be a key element of any next-gen television system that they would adopt. The other areas that are of interest are Jamaica. So Jamaica recently announced that they will use ATSC 3.0. That's a government regulatory decision. It has been made. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to read the news, forgive the plug, Lee, but ATSC came out with a news article on that just yesterday. And one of the things that's there is a call for a consultant to lead the project. So
Yes.
I encourage people to go to atsc.org and check on the news section. And there you'll find the whole article about what's going on in Jamaica. And they're not waiting. They want to have this project done. They want to be up on the air in basically next year, and they want to shut down 1.0 in like 2023. I mean, they're going fast. South Korea is already reaching 75% of households, and they're expecting to turn off ATSC 1.0 in 2027. So killing the simulcast there at some point soon. And then where was I last week or 2 weeks ago? When was it? Anyway, one of the places that I was in was Delhi, because India is seriously looking at ATSC 3.0 as a next-gen broadcast standard for that country. They are currently on DVB-T2. However, they're very interested in a direct-to-mobile play. And the reason is because the vast majority of people in India use cell phones to watch video, and that includes linear scheduled video, like cricket matches.
Exactly.
Believe me, the cricket matches are a huge burden for the cell phone network operators, because once the cricket match starts, that network is congested. So they're interested in the direct to mobile play, and they're also interested in this concept of offloading broadcast traffic from the cellular network to the broadcast network. So those are two of high interest in Delhi. And ATSC has an implementation team, and they've built a great technical demo in Delhi. And we're hoping that our next steps will be to get on the air with a test station. So we'll see where it goes. And
Some
then
very
the last
incredible
one,
things.
yeah,
happening.
one more to mention, Lee, which is Brazil. I'll be quick on this. They have put out a call for proposals for a TV 3.0 system, and ATSC 3.0 is among those systems being considered. What I like to call the bake-off, the testing is going on right now, where they're testing the various systems against their requirements and use cases. And we expect there to be some decisions potentially toward the end of the year. We'll see.
All right. Well, I know, like, I was just looking in my local Sam's Club, and they have tons of TVs for Christmas, obviously, but a good majority of them already have that next gen logo on them, especially all of your Sonys. And somebody just popped in a question and said something about the Sony and manufacturers building TV sets that only accept next gen TV on UHF channels 14 through 36. I wasn't aware of anybody making just a next gen TV set. Is that true or not?
Well, I think that, and I'll come to the question about the channel numbers in a minute. Most of the, I should say, all of the television sets that do ATSC 3.0 are dual capability 3.0 and 1.0. So I have an ATSC 3.0 television set, but there's no 3.0 in Boston yet. It's coming. And so I'm watching ATSC 1.0 on my TV, and when 3.0 stations come up, I'll be able to get those as well. With respect to the TV sets only accepting next-gen TV on the UHF channels, I actually don't know about that. I think that would be a better question perhaps for Brian Markwalter of the Consumer Technology Association, or perhaps some of the TV makers. That's not something I can speak to. And it looks like we have another question, if you want to go into that, or if you want to wait.
If we want to get into that, Ruben has asked ATSC 3.0 equipment for the LPTV industry. I found the new equipment cost for small market to be around 90 to 250,000 for a 35 DMA station. Some in the industry have mentioned that we are 5 years out before ATSC 3.0 market penetration. I have two ATSC 3.0 set-top boxes that I have used for more than 6 months, and I have not seen any monetization models justify the equipment cost of the set-top box and the broadcasting equipment at this time. When will we see real dollars to offset costs?
I think that's an excellent question. And let me see, Lee, if that's going to be something that we're going to be talking about in a minute.
And we can jump into that if you're ready.
Sure, why not? So in terms of monetization, I think there's two things going on with ATSC 3.0. One is certainly a defensive posture. The competitors of the broadcast industry are already doing 4K, right? So if you want to go to the major sports networks and you want to vie for sports broadcasting rights, you probably need some of these things. HDR is already out there on Amazon Prime. So to some extent, the better television is a defensive thing, and TV makers, and TV broadcasters know that in order to stay relevant, they need to be able to do these things. So then you think about, okay, well, what can we do in terms of new monetization opportunities? And I think that in the short term, you have the concept of the targeted advertising. And the reason why I think that that is probably something that's worth looking at in the short term is because we already have business models that we know about in terms of how that works. We already have systems for buying and selling these things in our digital platforms. So there's sort of a well-worn path that we can now follow in order to get into the targeted advertising world, and we can build business models around that. I think that the other thing that's important is the concept of data casting. I think that data casting is something that has the potential in the future to be a monetization. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but in a little bit, we can talk how LPTV can make that difference in terms of how quickly that can happen. I think LPTV stations have an opportunity to really move the needle in terms of when data casting is a monetizable option. So there's that piece. And then I think that there's also the possibility of subscription services. You can see that now with Avalka. They're already doing subscription services, and they're using LPTV as well as ATSC 3.0 to deliver content to set-top boxes. And that is a low-cost, basically bundle subscription service. So they're certainly working through that as a mechanism. But thinking about ATSC 3.0, it's possible to encrypt the content. And in fact, the content can be encrypted in such a way that it's still free to air, but it kind of puts your big stamp of copyright notice on it that says, thou shalt not redistribute this without proper permissions. But it's also possible to have the content encrypted in such a way that you need to have a subscription. And I know that broadcasters will certainly provide the services they're providing free to air. That's their obligation, and there's no expectation that obligation will change. But one could imagine some ancillary services and some pretty exciting extra content being available via subscription, pay-per-view, or even having a system whereby The HDTV version is free to air, but if you want the UHD with HDR version, it's just X number of dollars a month. So the concept of subscription services is also possible. So I think that all of these monetization capabilities are coming. And the question is how soon are they going to come, and when do we have to put our CapEx out? And I leave that to the business people who write business plans. We sort of do tech. And the goal with the ATSC technology is to make sure that whatever business plan or concepts that a broadcaster might have in mind that they see as an opportunity, that the ATSC 3.0 system has the flexibility to be able to technically do it. So that's I think the main thing.
Now, I know this is a very niche, but we had news this past week of a station out in California on a channel 6. And how did that work out for them?
Well, I read that, and it turns out that they're doing ATSC 3.0 on channel 6, and they're simultaneously running an FM service in the 87.75 chunk of their band, and they were pretty excited to find that it actually works. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's one example of what's happening. I think there are other things going on, such as I read about Auton, which is intending to use LPTV as a distribution partner for automotive applications. And, I think that there are a whole breadth of things going on in LPTV that are exciting. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the LPTV and the ATSC 3.0 system is that with LPTV, the regulations are different. You don't have to simulcast the existing content if you don't want to. And that allows you to basically flash cut your entire bandwidth, whereas the full power TV stations have to simulcast their ATSC 1.0 services, at least for a period of time. The other thing that's interesting is with LPTV, I don't think that they have the 120-day waiting period where you have to give the MVPDs the heads up, and you cannot launch for 120 days after that notice has been given. So LPTV is quite nimble with ATSC 3.0 compared to full power stations. And I think that that's an exciting opportunity for LPTV station owners.
Now, we got some news right before we went on the air here that there is a news release coming next week. But we heard from our friends at ATSC Multicasting that they're about to get started with their ATSC network. What do you know about that so far?
Well, we saw the press release that Hewlett Packard Enterprise was announced as a partner, and you heard it here first, folks. A little insider scoop: 10 LPTV stations will be launched in Q1 of 2022 with ATSC Multicasting.
I believe they're actually starting December 1st. So,
oh, I think you may be right about that. I guess it's by Q1 they're going to be done. So the first one's going to be online in December 1st. And my understanding is there's going to be an announcement coming out real soon now, which talks about which cities and what are the other partners involved. But it's very exciting. 10 stations, and these are new transmitter light ups across the country with ATSC Multicasting. So what's tremendously interesting to me about that is the amount of bandwidth that's suddenly created. So not only do you have 10 sticks reaching a big audience, some of these sticks are in huge cities, I know that. And with the additional capacity of ATSC 3.0 versus 1.0, and without the simulcast, suddenly you have 30 megabits per second that you can be sending practically at the same signal to noise ratio as a 1.0 system, which is currently operating under 20. So this huge capacity is suddenly opened up and basically instantly opened up. And the reason that that's so exciting is because we think about data casting possibilities in the full power stations that simulcast is required. The fact is, there's not a lot of bandwidth available while simulcast is ongoing, because we have to do all of our ATSC 1.0 services, and we want to do our ATSC 1.0 Diginet services because that's part of our business model. And we have to layer on these 3.0 services. How much bandwidth is left to work on data casting? And we have seen some examples where they're specifically carving out bandwidth. So for example, the Motown Chess Track in Detroit, where the channel sharing agreement carved out about 10% of the bandwidth specifically for automotive testing. And that's great. But that bandwidth is hard to come by. while you have to simulcast. Where you think of LPTV, they can come in immediately and just open up the bandwidth. And you could envision that the LPTV stations, if business arrangements were possible with other stations, that suddenly the bandwidth for data casting isn't, however many years simulcasting land is not so many years away while we wait for simulcasting to slow down. It can be a lot sooner than that. So it's very interesting to think about what data casting opportunities might be available when there's not very much bandwidth to use versus what if we had kind of an open spigot right away. I'll be curious to see what happens with that.
Yes, and there is definitely a data casting educational model attached to that as well. So we'll look forward to that news release here in the next week in regards to art and multicasting. But something that goes along with that, a question that Larry has popped up there says, do you think there's a model for LPTV stations to be lighthouses for local full power stations?
Well, I don't see a technical reason why not. I think that makes a lot of sense that could take place. And I think, for example, that Sinclair and some other broadcasters actually own LPTV stations and are doing that unilaterally. So clearly there's something there. And you could envision that an LPTV station could be a test bed, it could be extra bandwidth, it could be for new business development, all of those types of things. In terms of whether full power commercial stations will work closely with existing LPTV station owners, I guess that's really a business arrangement, and I don't know how those things get sorted out. But in terms of whether the LPTV can be used for those purposes, I would say it seems to make sense, particularly in the cities where LPTV has a reach that's almost as big as the 1.0 full power television. If you want to have a lighthouse, you could host all of the ATSC 1.0 stations in the market with your 3.0 services on that lighthouse, and nobody has to shuffle their 1.0 services around.
And that's where I would encourage a local LPTV operator to actually, meet with your full power guys in town and see if that is a service that they could use. Definitely broach the subject with them anyway, versus sitting there waiting for them. They can go ahead and contact them. But we've come to the end of our 30-minute period, and this is a time when we do open it up for question and answers. So while we wait for questions to come into the queue, if anybody wants to stump you. So if you've got any other things we haven't got to yet that you definitely want to get in, this is the time.
Well, I certainly do. I see there's a question here, but let me just insert this one thing, which is ATSC and ATSC 3.0 are not standing still. We know that this is a changing marketplace. It's going to change dramatically year over year, month over month. And unlike ATSC 1.0, ATSC 3.0 is a platform that's going to evolve. I mean, you think about your various streaming apps that might be on a connected television, and they're able to update those apps on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever they want. They send an update to the TV. Hey, we got a new update to our app. And with ATSC 1.0, we designed the system, we implemented the system. There's a lot of CapEx. Everybody sat on it, and then it didn't really change for 20 years, right? Right. Basically, we put out all the CapEx, we raked in a lot of money, and now we got to do this all over again. And what we want to do is say, okay, well, this time we don't want to have to do a non-backward compatible change. We want to be able to do something where we can evolve the system. So ATSC is very much embracing that. And we have a number of new projects that are underway even now that are working on the ATSC 3.0 system and its improvement. One is the latest video codec, VVC, which has come out of MPEG. That's a current project within ATSC. Another is we are working on a core network, which is similar to what the cellular industry uses in order to connect data services across towers, across wide regions, including the whole country. So a broadcast core network that allows broadcasters to work together to become a nationwide network operator. We're also working on ATSC 3.0 5G harmonization. We just formed a new ad hoc team on that. So I just want to say that ATSC is a very, very active organization, and its members are really the stewards of the ATSC 3.0 platform development. And anyone who's interested in participating can certainly check out our website and consider whether they want to join. Or if you want to audit some meetings, you could do that as a guest, but please don't hesitate to contact me, M. Noland at atsc.org if you have any questions about it. But the main message is ATSC is working for you. And our goal is to make sure that you have the technical platform this year and next year and well into the future that's going to serve the business needs for your industry.
Now, I've been very amazed at all of the working groups within the ATSC, and I do encourage you, and I did want to put that plug in out there for anybody or any groups or folks that want to actually join the ATSC and to get involved with processes. There's some incredible work going on behind the scenes, and all sorts of working groups to help make this a great standard and to help us as broadcasters make money at this. So,
exactly.
So if we want to get to what we've got in the chat there, how do you see rural parts of the country transitioning to ATSC 3.0?
Yeah, so in terms of the rural, I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of this, because as we know, there's a whole lot of hype about 5G, and 5G is, has great promise, but when is it going to come to the rural areas? It's going to be a long time, right? But you look at ATSC 1.0, ATSC 1.0 currently reaches some 97% of the population of the US. It's out there. And there's no reason why one couldn't convert a rural television station from ATSC 1.0 to 3.0. I think the biggest challenge in the rural areas is looking for channel sharing partners. There are some areas where the PBS station is the station. And if you can't flash cut and you haven't got a partner, what do you do? So I think those are things that are going to be considered, as the rollout goes on. But on the plus side in the rural areas, they're actually, when there are channel sharing partners, they're actually a little easier to do in some ways, because the network is not so congested. The spectrum is not so congested. I think that we're going to see New York, Los Angeles, Boston, some of these larger markets go to ATSC 3.0 in the coming months. But why are they behind all these other 46 markets? Because they're the really big cities. They're hard to do. But the rural markets are easier to do. So I think that we'll see 3.0 in the rural areas quickly. I don't see any barrier to entry other than the one use case that I mentioned.
And that's another opportunity for LPTV to shine, because that's one of our places that we dominate, and that is in the rural areas. So another good question here: how might the changing composition of the FCC affect the 3.0 transition, particularly the simulcast requirements? Yeah,
so Lee, I can't really comment on FCC proceedings. ATSC is strictly in the world of tech and strictly not in the world of advocacy and lobbying. I will say that I have a huge amount of respect for the commissioners that are there. I've had an opportunity to meet with many of them, and including staffers of Ms. Rosenworcel. I think they have terrific minds, and I'm looking forward to working very closely with them to the extent that ATSC does. I mean, ATSC really is, when we speak to the FCC, we're more like, think about bringing in an expert witness to put out an opinion in a trial. The expert witness has no say in which way the trial will go, this way or that way. It doesn't matter. They're just there to say, this is what the technology is. And that's what ATSC's role really is, to make sure that the commission understands what the technology is, how it works, answer their technical questions. So in terms of what they're going to do, we'll see. And I think organizations like this one, like NAB, like APTS, AWARN, are probably better suited to answer questions about what the FCC might do.
Right, and Richard, that's your question has to do with the FCC, and I suggest everybody to save those FCC related questions to next Wednesday, when we'll have a more active discussion in regards to what's happening at the commission and how that is affecting LPTV. So a little plug for next Wednesday at 3 p.m. when we will be discussing what is going on specifically at the FCC. So moving on to Ruben, have they perfected the SFN systems for complete DMA coverage?
So again, the question might be, are we talking about technically, or are we talking about a regulatory question? I know that there was a regulatory question before the FCC not long ago that impacted how SFNs could be built and what that would come to. So in the answer to the question of whether the FCC has ruled in such a way that allows SFNs to be built for DMA coverage, I'm not sure. I think the answer is they ruled in favor, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. In terms of whether it's technically possible, we have SFNs up now. There's an SFN in Phoenix, and I think there's at least one other, and I know Humber's going to build one. So the excitement around technology, thank you, Ruben. Yeah, the excitement around SFNs is very high. I know we have a number of organizations out there whose primary focus is to build single frequency networks, organizations like Signal Infrastructure Group and others that are really working toward that. I think that organizations see the SFNs as a mechanism for increasing bandwidth, because if we go back to our thought about the continuum of the trade-off between signal strength and data capacity, if you install an SFN, suddenly your signal becomes stronger. So what should I do with that? I could either convert that signal strength into more bits, keep my same signal strength as it was before, but use this capacity when I do my trade-off to send more services, in which case maybe that's a business case for me. Or it may be that I'm going to have that stronger signal and be able to reach a larger audience. I think I heard a number for a city like San Francisco, where if you had an SFN with even just 2 towers, you get almost a 60% boost in the number of eyeballs you can reach because of the terrain of that city. So city by city, I think it depends on what you're going to get from an SFN in terms of whether it's worth doing. In Pyeongchang, in the 2018 Olympics in South Korea, they had a mobile service. They had a bus going at highway speeds between the hockey arena and the Olympic Village with ATSC 3.0 on it, and they were doing all of that with one stick. They didn't even need the SFN for it. So I think that the terrain is probably going to govern some of that, and the business models are going to cover some of that. But as far as I know, technically, it works.
And that's also a possibility for LPTV to employ SFNs also. It's not just limited to full power stations. So definitely in regards to filling in terrain and filling in, dead spots in your signal path, it's great to be able to effectively use the SFNs, and it's available to us as LPTV operators as well. Well, it has been a good discussion. Right now, our question queue is empty. So we'll bring today's webinar to a wrap. We appreciate you joining us today and keeping us, giving us a little update on what is going on with the ATSC world. And we hope that others will join in and join the ATSC as well to help create all of the various standards. And thank you for being with us. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, as I usually do, that shows our sponsors, and a reminder to come and join us at the ATBA and what we're doing. We do have the event planned for April 25th, Monday at NAB. We want you to be a part of that as well. Also, next week, we have a very, very important get-together on our webinar that we are going to be talking about what some folks look at as new rules, but just kind of some old ones that are being rehashed before us in regards to our licenses and those looming deadlines coming up. We're going to have some news in regards to that next Wednesday on our webinar, so you're going to be sure and join us for that. But appreciate you, Madeleine, for being with us, and we'll say bye for this Wednesday, and everybody have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks, everybody.
And also a shout out to our Facebook audience. Thank you, Rod and gang, and all the great comments that you guys have put out there. Well, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much.